So our speaker tonight is David Bambridge, who's the director of the landscaping company, The Garden Makers. And the title of the talk is Going Native in the Urban Landscape, Creeks to Casinos. Lots of varied locations for his work. Yeah.
You're on?
Yep, and we can see.
This is impressive. I was crossing fingers and toes here. Whoops. So if I take you back, it's Creek to Casino. Again, can I just, the good images you see are Bruce's. The not so good images are our own feeble attempts to document the works as we go. So there's pretty stark contrast between them. And I guess I thought to juxtapose creeks and casinos, because they're the two extremes, but we're still using native plants in those environments, because in our sort of urban landscape work, and we do work non-urban, but let's call it urban, we're in that sort of intersection of people, plants, and the built structures that we live, work, and play in. So it's that junction of all those three elements that happen. And so creeks to casinos, that one is a creek here and the other is the casino roof that we'll have a look at. This is Narrowbean Creek, which feeds into from the back of Warriewood Valley and feeds into Narrowbean Lagoon and ultimately into the ocean. And adjoining that, I'll just say, you'll see on that screen, I hope my pointer's coming up, there's a line here which is a 25-metre setback there, which was part of the development guidelines. I'm lucky that one of my old business partners was instrumental as an environmental group in getting that buffer from the creek. When places are developed along the creek line, they are required now to give back 25 metres of space to the public, and that's the bit that we've concentrated on this project. We have done a little bit here as well, but essentially worked along what was the former creek line. It's been reshaped because there are hydraulic issues in flooding and what have you that occur. And this buffer zone is now dedicated back as a revegetation zone. Lots of documents, none of them actually work together. So we had structural engineers details for the creek, I've dropped you off again. Let me see if I can get back. So we've got structural engineers who designed the hydraulics for the creek. We've got arborist reports about retaining some of the existing vegetation, because there were some really good figs and unfortunately lots of good casuarinas that were removed. We've got an ecologist's vegetation management plan to comply with. And then we've got the other impacts of a developer stroke builder wants to maximise the site coverage and spend as little as possible, I guess. So there's an arborist report identifying things, and I just put a page out of the arborist report which relates to protection of trees on development sites, which should occur, but doesn't always. In the hurly-burly of the built world. This is now that we had a landscape specification, which again identified some of the area, and we're talking about the creek line corridor there. There's the vegetation management report prepared by an ecologist group, and that's the species list of, I'll take you back. That's the species list. So we put in around about 15,500 tubes there. And this job we did that in early 2019, realigned the creek. The photo on the VMP there is what the creek looked like at the start there. So a big issue for us, and I'll run through a few slides and maybe talk about it, were that getting the procurement of the plants, getting some reasonable provenance on them and in the timeline, because the vegetation management plan sets out really beautifully that it's a 2-year period to commence work, do the weed control and procure the plants. We got engaged once we had less than 6 months. In fact, we had about 3.5, 4 months to sort of get this happening and get it over the line and to complete the building works associated with it. So that seems to be the most common issue that we deal with, and I think Dave in the bush regen, but particularly revegetation works allied to a building or development project. Everyone thinks that you can go to Bunnings and buy it at that point in time to satisfy the project requirements. And as I guess we all know, dealing with plants, that's not the case there. So this is when we first started work there. So on the left, you've got star pickets, and we're working through with a slasher on the end of a machine. And what we tried to do here is to, I'll jump ahead again, sorry. What we've tried to do on the site, we have slashed the lantana and we've chipped it. We've chipped everything that came off the creek line. And in a purest form, we, I guess, would have had some weed material that may have regenerated seed. This is old paddocks here and has had a sort of agricultural background, agriculture and horticulture. So essentially on the site, we've used all of the vegetative material that was present and recycled that within the site there. So nothing's taken away. Likewise with the soil, we had about 3,500 tonne of soil we've moved and relocated, screened, and then put back in. So again, no soil left the site as well. Another view of what it looks like. These tasks are, when you're given a short timeline, it's not all that useful. So that's what we're doing. We stockpiled here, we're working through. That's one of the more significant, I've lost it again, sorry. There were some figs on the creek line to retain. Unfortunately, well, fortunately and unfortunately, in the arborist report, they weren't picked up for, well, they were picked up. In the ecologist report and some of the others, there was a Butyricus rubignosa and not picked up for retention. And we managed to save that with a bit of discussion and getting council involved to agree that we'd have to realign the creek in a different way and still meet the hydraulic capacities there. So that's early stage. Again, we've adopted also the idea, we prefer to use rock toes down on the base of the creek line when we do this, because they're very unstable, and you'll see shortly some erosion matting that we use to do the erosion controls early on. Just having trouble getting my cursor going here. Let me see what I can do. Right. So this is early stage soil profiling on the left and adjustment. That is the site soil there. Really deep alluvial soil on, if you imagine it's swamp mahogany type territory, really deep, really potential for a lot of weed regeneration because it's rich, not like sort of ridgeline material. So lots of aranda grass there. So that's an early stage where we're starting the earthworks there. That's that same area after we've realigned the creek and removed soil and play with it. We've got some temporary erosion controls in, and they're replaced by the rocks that you see on the left. And here we go, we've moved into that element of it. So the creek substantially widened for flood capacity. The rock toes there, very visible now. You'll see from some of the other images it's not going to occur. And then we've jute matted down there with, we've added compost to the site soil to, I'll just take you back, to increase its ability to grow the tubes in a reasonable period of time. So it was all tube stock installed there. So we added that because we weren't sure, we didn't have any soil test results, so we couldn't really validate the true condition of the soil, but we've added that as a subscription to a bit of extra organic matter there. So that's realigned, that's looking back up at where that last photo came. We put temporary irrigation in here because this was right in the middle of the drought and there was no site water from the building development. And we did pump the creek down quite low at one stage in order to do the earthworks. And the water quality is not great there, and also the volume required to do the planting. We ended up putting a temporary irrigation system in and connecting up through the 3 hydrants there. So the other side of the creek has now been done. If you ever wander down there, Meriton have built or in the process of building on the other side, they've taken a slightly different style to their creek line works. So that's looking at that same image 6 months later. So planted out by May 2019, and that's the end of it. Now that's again another image looking down the creek at that 6 months. So you can see it's growing in quite well at this stage. We were really happy. This is extraordinary growth, and I think that's because of that deep alluvium that's on this former swamp area there. So you can see again that's another end of the creek past where we were looking, and I've now got you to some of these images of the creek complete. So we did do, we did install quite a bit of Phragmites, and I'll walk you back a bit, and they've now really done well. We've got a lot of Ludwigia where we've got to paddle out and get rid of that. That's a major problem there, but the rest of it's grown in, and now you'll see the difference in images because we're now dealing with a more professional level of photography than has previously occurred. So that's the building and development behind. It's our aged care, and we've managed to, that ficus rubignosa right-hand side of the photo was what was earmarked for removal. It's now taken a while to come back and fully come back to leaf. It was in not particularly good state, but we're really happy that that's a significant thing for us. And you can see the developed Acacia longifolia, the species list is there. So we have got quite a few swamp mahoganies, robustas, and what we have found in the photos will indicate that. Here's a couple here where you'll see, whoops, I'll take you back, that there's a lot of natural casuarina regeneration going on now. So we're quite pleased that's happened. We've got a lot of some imperata and a lot of the isolepis and things coming through. One of the plants I really like, it's not apparent in this photo, but I've become a real fan of Persicaria on those sort of wet edges of jobs because it's such a great plant. It grows so prolifically. So yeah, I'm a bit of a fan. Again, that's the finished look, which one of those earlier photos had rocks stacked just near there. So that's come up really well. Council's happy with the result, and we're really happy with that as well there. So that's the sort of story. 15,500, I think our planting density there is around about 6 to the square metre. This area, I'll just take you back. Our most difficult area to get revegetated was under the figs. Since this photo, I've been down a couple of times now. We've actually got some Biolahederaceae and a bit more ground cover going in there. That was one of the problems with the amount of leaf drop from the figs. There's a Moreton Bay, Port Jackson, and unfortunately a bit of Ficus elastica in there too, but it's doing an intimate dance with the Moreton Bay, so it's remaining there. So this just gives you something. We had one of these events occur. This is Brookvale Creek, which we also did a few years back in 2016. That was recent. That had a similar treatment, and you can see what happens in a storm event there. I'll just whip you back. That's the storm event. The water level actually came up to the top of the jute mat that you see there, and in full flood, and it washed out and caused quite a bit of damage. But this is 12 months later. So again, we're really happy with that. That's got revegetated. We've handed that back. Unfortunately, the aftercare is not so good on this one by the client. We've okay. So we've got out of the creek and we've got on the roof of the casino. And as I say, we're gambling on success, so to speak, at this point. That image is shows you the layers that are involved on this roof. So we're growing and on a very shallow soil profile. There's only 150 mil of soil on that rooftop. It's about just under 5,000 square metre roof. And we've those plants had a journey up in the lift and the crane, a combination of that. You'll see that. So we had to lift, I think on the schedule, what do we have? There's 18,500 plants on the roof there. They all had an interesting journey to get up there from multiple suppliers. It's 63% native. So we were going from the creek, 100% obviously in regen purposes. This we were able to get a 63% native pallet there. And that was really driven by the client. We pushed for a greater propensity there. We had a bit of work in the redesign of the plant list here. But again, I think it's the Kardashian moment that the clients have where if it looks like it's got a big bold flower, it doesn't matter where it comes from. We want one because when you're looking behind, it's a hotel. and there's people paying big bucks to look down, and they love to see the flowers, I guess, rather than the actual habitat that might be created there. So you're looking at the layers here of drainage cell, which is a drainage structure that's 30 mil thick, sits there, and I'll do a little, I think I've got an image of the actual structure of this here. Geotextile on top of that. Underneath that is a waterproof membrane and protection of it. We have the geotextile overlays this, then there's a 150 mil, and it's a special lightweight soil. So this soil, what can I say? It's a special mix we've had to make up for this job with constituents, a product called phytocell, which florists use. It's really light and does retain moisture, and that helps in that shallow soil profile. But that is, there's 900 cubic meters on the roof of this, all crane lifted up. So that's a lot of crane lifts to get there. And then the problem we had here is the slab loading of this roof here wouldn't sustain, well, two things, wouldn't sustain the depth of mulch that would wanted to put on. And equally, we had to have something on there because it's so windy. So our experience in the past is most mulches in these situations will blow away. And in fact, we had a lot of airborne drainage cell, fabric, all sorts of things gets windborne here. Post, and I'll show you some photos completed. From our maintenance point of view, we've just handed it back over after a year. We can't use herbicide sprays up there because it's so windy. Our window to spray for weed removal is about an hour between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning because it's just so windy all the time. The slightest breath of air comes off the harbour, which is left of photo, and impossible. So it's hand weeding. We take off 2 to 3 bulker bags a week of weeds because we've created a reasonably good environment for plants, but it's a fantastic environment for weeds as well. So we'll move along. That's the roof plant layout. So the next slide, next one I'll show you has all the mixes, but there are 11 different plant mixes of species. There they are. So they're all mixed to provide various things. So if we walk back to that one, that was the set out for us, reasonably difficult. We actually had to set that out with little garden stakes to enable us to get that. And you'll read that in Bruce's photos. You'll see the patterns created later. So species mixes there, and Sue's got a copy of this species mix as well. They're really difficult. The plant sourcing was really difficult. We had 9 different iterations of the plant schedule to get to that. And we first got involved a year prior to commencement, but no one wanted to talk plants at that stage. It was all structure. The planting became a real issue because we had to pre-order. Some stuff came from Queensland, Northern New South Wales, Sydney, a couple of different sites, and a little bit from Victoria to satisfy that. And it was quite difficult. And we just got them in time to meet the project deadline, as it turns out. That's the detail for the roof. Sorry, and I've jumped again. That's the sort of structural profile that's there. So there's the slab with a waterproof membrane on it, the drainage cell layer, the geotech, the red line there, shallow soil, and there's originally proposed to be mulch. As it turned out, we had to have something wouldn't work. The mulch they were going to use, that one on that drawing, you won't read it, but they wanted to use a scoria or a pebble. The weight was too much. The slab couldn't take it. They would have had pebbles in the high rollers room of the gamblers below at the casino, so unsatisfactory outcome. So in this case, we went for the jute mesh and we had to get that down at the end of every day on this job because the soil would blow away on a windy day as fast as we could spread it. That's the sort of, again, I can provide this to Sue if you're interested in that. That's a sort of, again, the image doesn't read as well. The printed version does. I'm sorry. Whoops. I'll fly back. But that gives you an idea of weights and the sort of structure. And Fido Green are the people in Melbourne who supply the lightweight soil additive. To give you an idea, you would have spoken with Simon about bulk densities of soil or the weight of a soil, I guess, perhaps. This soil that we're using is 1/3 the weight of a normal soil profile. So the heavier constituents in a soil that might be used in a normal suburban, urban landscape on ground have been removed and have been replaced with lightweight stuff. challenge is that lightweight material, if when it dries out, is really hard to hydrate again. And it's it presents a bit of a challenge. We can get the root growth quite well into it, but it's critical the amount of moisture that goes in there. And if you have a calculator handy, you'll be able to work out there's 15,000 lineal meters of drip line on the roof, and it emits 2.3 litres per hour. We run it for half an hour each day. So 15,000 times around about, let's say a bit over a litre, probably a litre and a half in round, is what the water consumption is each time the irrigation system runs. That's another view of the profile that we were working right up to the builders as that area hasn't been waterproofed here yet. So we've progressed as far as we can. That's where we're up to, and we have plants set out there. So the planting, I'll show you the next run of slides up here will indicate to you the sequence of work. So this was handed over 3 o'clock on the 13th, and then you'll see them date stamped as we go through. So you can get an idea. Whoops, I'll take you back. That was waterproof membrane. There's our bags. We preloaded about 600 tonne on the roof, or 600 cubic metres, I should say, to enable us to keep going at a steady pace there, and the crane will appear in the next one. So everything came up on that crane. And so we started there, we're working our way through. This was on the 10th of the 2nd. Then the next progression will take you to the 19th. We're progressing, plants are in irrigation. The irrigation had to be installed progressively because the volume of plants and the shallow profile meant if we didn't have water on site straight away, we'd lose the plants within a couple of days there. So we're working through that progression, waterproof membrane. Now that's covered. We're working our way through there. You'll see the crane disappear shortly. Crane's there. We've worked up to a point where we saw some of the ground level photos there, chasing the builders around the roof. Crane's gone. Our last soil, we had to bring up by the lift. So that was a bit tedious because they had to take the crane out. The crane had a hole there. If I take you back, the crane, there's a hole in the roof there, which we also had worked down on 2 stories below that we were lifting materials into. Eventually, they had to close the roof up in order for us to complete the garden, the roof garden. So as you see that progression, that hole's covered in, waterproofed, and then crane's gone. That's the end of that section. You can see, so we're just completing that last section there, and that was on the 21st of the 3rd. We finished the end of March, 30th of March. This gets us down on ground level. I thought you might be more interested in what's happening here. So that's what the finished product looks like at initial completion. Plants, again, the problem on this one, we asked for 6 plants per square metre. They budget allowed 4.5. So for us, that's not satisfactory. It's not dense enough. And the point that we've made, and it's partially occurred, is that without the horizontal growth potential with a greater plant density, the heat factor is a factor, that the extra moisture that's used is a factor. And the drip line had to go on the surface here over the mesh, to help hold the mesh down, but also we had to slice all the mesh for these plants. And we did that with a mechanical saw. And when we did that, if the irrigation was underneath, we were likely to have some major catastrophes. We'd have a bit more drip or a bit more flood rather than drip out there. And it's worked. It's a bit of a trial. I haven't done this before, but we decided we'd give that a go, and we're happy with the result. Or it looked like that'll probably happen on another one of a similar style of thing. So the next one is just a different vantage. So you've got the Tower of Mordor from Lord of the Rings in the background from Jamie Packer, and appearing on the other side of Darling Harbour. And these are Bruce's photos. I'll take you back there. Sorry, they've scrolled through too quickly. So that's the finished work 12 months later. No, sorry, this is 12 months now. This is Christmas, so finished in March. That's sort of 9 months growth there that occurred at that point. And then ground level, again, the imagery is much better for the reasons I've outlined previously. We've got some pretty impressive growth. Carpa brodus is in fact one of the heroes. that we've noticed there on a couple of other jobs where we're doing roofs. So it's a fabulous thing, as is, I'll talk about some of the successful species on these later if you like. So just working through some of the finished work there. Scaevola was also good. The convolvulus is in play here, but we have had really good success with the Scaevola, Amula, and a few, and Rhagodia as well. That's continuing on. Now, we've just got off that roof, and we've done a little dance to Surrey Hills now, and we're on a rooftop, smaller scale, a couple of 100 square metres. It's a refurbishment. Oh, I'll take back there. It's a refurbishment of an older building here, and this is on an even. Well, it started on an even shallower soil profile. This doesn't have a concrete slab roof. It's got a sheet material roof, and when you walk on this roof, you can feel the flex under your feet. The landscape architect on this one unfortunately got the calculations wrong, and we're only allowed to put 100 mil on the roof for the plants, and it didn't work. So I thought I won't bore you with the failures too much. It looks bad for us. So we just had the hero shots here at the end. But this roof failed originally. We predicted that, and we went back at an early stage when the plants were only 6 months and a fraction of the size of what you see there now. And we ripped the matting back on the roof and added another 50 mil of soil. And that was because, unfortunately, between all the consultants involved, someone got the calculation wrong. And again, this is one where can't use a mulch on there. 2 reasons. An organic mulch would blow off the roof because it's very windy. And second reason, the gravel mulch is too much weight. We had to do the calculation for the mature weight of the vegetation there to see what we could plant there for this one and work out that sort of thing. So we've walking along the roof. This is great. Success for us. We're really happy with it. Again, Sue's got the plant schedule for this if you're interested in what went in. There we've got good growth. That extra 50 mil depth of soil on a really shallow profile made a big difference there, and it's irrigated and it's jute matted as well. It's a special mix coming from this mix we blew onto the roof with you've probably seen them around, the blower trucks. We had to close I think it's Lacey Street's the site. I think it's Favo Street. We had to close for a day on the weekend to get the materials in and blow the soil up there. So that was put in with a blower truck, and it's again a very lightweight mix. It's all about putting lightweight constituents in there that will still provide a growing media. You're sort of midway between a traditional soil and hydroponics to some extent there. That's the plant schedule. There are first dib was 675, didn't work. We said it wouldn't because it was this is again an issue with not enough plants, not enough soil. So it failed. The client was good, pretty savvy sort of a guy who does these developments a bit, and went, I don't want failure, I want success. So he stumped up to make sure it was a success by allowing us to go back, add the soil and to bump up the plant numbers. So this one is species-wise, 77% in species and number native. We've got 23% non-native species. And again, it was a little bit about the, once you get salespeople involved, they like bright, shiny things or things that flower. There's another completed works one. We're really happy with this. So is the client, and so is the City of Sydney. They use this as a bit of a benchmark. And as an aside, just so you know, we did film a TV commercial for the federal government here to promote apprenticeship training that ran on SBS and in newspapers and things like that. So the plants got the hero shot on TV as well as the paper, which was fantastic for that. So creek to casino, there we go. This is a different creek that Bruce is. This is Oxford Falls Creek, which runs into the back, another area of Narrowbean Lagoon out there. Whoops, and I'll jump back. Creek to casino, I thought, as long as you're still awake, I'd bore you with one other area that we work in, which is street trees and some of the changes that are occurring in an urban landscape, but also from a standards and plant production point of view as well. So urban forest is the catchphrase. City of Sydney is looking to have a tree planted where possible every 10 metres of public domain, 10 linear metres of travel, a tree. And that's their mantra. We've been now 8 years planting street trees through the City of Sydney. We've got another couple of years to go, but as soon as one comes out, one's replaced, and always new planting opportunities are being sought for trees in every possible location in the city. This is Brachychiton rupestris, and that's a park specimen, that one, that we don't use as a street tree. I just thought I'd mention that there is this standard, sorry, I'll jump again, AS2303, which is a standard developed in 2015 for validating purchase of tree stock. So there are a select number of people who are growing to this standard now, and it will increasingly be the only acceptable standard for trees that are used in a public domain situation. So it's getting uptake. Takes a while for standards to get in there, but it's very prescriptive. And what it's led to for us, and I'll hopefully demonstrate that going forward here, is for a better quality plant, more durable, able to survive the ravages of the urban landscape. So in it, it's very specific, and it requires the nurseries from the time the plant's grown in a tube right through to the time it goes in the ground to be able to produce a better plant in a stem structure and in the root situation as well. And there's a number of other requirements that form part of this standard. It has a prescription in terms of caliper size at a certain height on the trunk, and an expected size range for trees obviously varies a bit from place to place. This is a tree inspection form that we're required to do by the time we place an order with a nursery, and we have to provide that to our client, the City of Sydney in this case, and we document whether it's acceptable. A lot of trees don't meet the standard and get rejected. Again, I don't know whether I sent you a copy of this, Sue, but happy to send one on. And that just comes straight out of the Australian standard. So a version of these is completed by the nurseries at every time the plant is potted up from early days, and it just keeps going. Then here's the good bit. That's the root system, which is quite different to the root systems you'll see. Now I'll show you what we do. We torture the root now. So 10% of the roots are removed at the time it goes in the ground, which is very atypical for horticultural practice. And they're not quite teaching that in horticulture courses yet, but that's what is occurring. Because that root pruning has occurred on a smaller scale at every stage of the nursery production, that's encouraged a fibrous root system, which makes the plant more adaptable when it goes in the ground. And we've found that with the 8 years we've been doing this now, that it has produced a much more resilient plant and much more able to deal with some of the things. I'll show you one of the issues that we have to deal with that. So next one, the ag lines are used not for drainage, but for watering purposes, brought to the surface in the planting holes. Now, one of the advantages of this method of production is the plant fails if you need to have a stake to support it. None of our tree plantings require staking other than to keep the people out, not to keep the plant straight. So these are to deal with the errant car doors, large Great Danes, people who've had too much tooheys Friday night and might cause catastrophic damage to the tree. No other reason. The trees don't require them. And that process that I just went through with you to comply with the standards, part of the outcome for that has been to produce trees that are not requiring staking at any stage once they're installed, from 25 litre size and up. And then we just go through the north. The N is a north point. That's one of the other prescriptive things that we are dealing with, is we have to orient the trees when they go in the ground with the north point orienting to north. A little bit tricky. You've got to adjust it because it's really magnetic north sometimes, not true north. There's a little bit of adjustment there. So, and some of the trees we have 1,000 litre ficus rubic noses that we're putting. This is going in the rock, went in the rocks, in a little park area there. So they range from 75 litre size through to 1,000 litre there. Next one is the light rail. These are grown in, and we'll just talk about the different soils now that we're talking about. So these are grown in a trench that trench extends in a linear way all the way up the street. It's around about 600 to 800 deep and around about 1.5 meters wide, and it extends to enable a sufficient root zone to get that tree up and established there. These are Zelcolas, they're not native, but we are doing a similar thing with native trees as well. It's the same applies. So what you see at the surface is a very small tree grade that belies what lies beneath the ground. What also lies beneath the ground, if I segue, is a lot of services. So a lot of services, this is again a watering issue. So we feed through the ag pipe, it's brought to the surface, and now these are brought to the surface. That's what we do. Now that soil, that is soil in the bottom. You may say that looks like rock. Sorry, it's actually soil. That's structural soil. Whoops, I'll whip back to it. That's what the tree pits have, because the void spaces between those bits of rock create forage for the root zone. And the reason that sometimes we have the root pruning necessary, that's how much of the root system was removed for this tree in order to fit the services in the trench. So the services got priority, unfortunately, despite a whole lot of other planning on the light rail. And so that root bore has been pruned, and that tree has been in now for 2 years, and you would be surprised how successful it's developed a shoot system, because the fibrous nature of the remaining roots has given a lot of potential to develop its root system, which not always the case in standard nursery production. We do go out at night, but we go out at night to plant trees. This is up in Hyde Park. We in landscape, you never sleep. You're not at night clubbing. You're actually out filling the parks with trees. So that was a night shift. Get it in, and that's the morning after, so to speak. Structural soil cells. So this is another way to create really good root runs for trees in the urban landscape. The footpath, that provides structural support for a concrete or paving system that might go over the top of that. And we can have a tree in the tree hole there, and the roots can forage all the way through that lead. So it's the potential's there to have the pavements that everyone wants to walk on, with also the ability to provide sufficient root zone for the tree to get to a successful height and really achieve the shade and the habitat that we're looking for. Structural soil, that I think I sent that to you too, Sue. That is, it's 4 parts rock, 1 part a sort of sandy soil. That's the nature of it. Simon Lee, if you were talking to him again, he's been instrumental in developing some of these specialty soils for this purpose. That's what it looks like when it goes in. It looks like rock. People think you've made a mistake. You forgot to put the soil in the hole, and we have to say no. We do use soil, an 80-20 really light mix. There, you're probably aware that with mature stuff, no organic matter below 300 mil. Otherwise, it goes anaerobic. So we're only ever backfill the loss. We use 200 to 250 mil top fill from the top of the root ball down. Below that, no organic matter. Otherwise, you get anaerobic conditions, lack of oxygen lack of oxygen in the presence of water, and organic matter decaying means you kill the roots. That's the end of the trees, but more likely the beginning for this one. There's a big one we put in Harold Park, early stages of that development. It's another fig, I think, on that one. So then I thought, again, now we're getting towards the end, so please bear with me a bit if you like. This is Urbane Natives. We've moved into, again, some series of photos courtesy of Bruce. This is one of our favourite jobs, and Bruce, thank you again for the photographs. This is 100% native rooftop. It's the Apple headquarters in Martin Place. Whoops, I'll take you back to that shop. So this is their head office, not a store or anything like that, where the Apple boffins recreate in this space and eat their food and drink as well out here. So the plant palette mix is really interesting for this. And again, Sue's got a copy of that, because this is where you can demonstrate that you can go wholly native and still satisfy the Kardashian culture and get a result that satisfies the whole bag here, I think. This is how it was going together here. And we had installed metal, their core 10 planters, bit of a problem. We had to put an insulation layer in. They weren't designed particularly well. And that face of that green wall faces west. So the temperature on the metal of the planter is ferocious in the middle of summer. And it's a bit of stuff. He has got a harness on, so he is working safely despite what you might think off that ladder. That's the plant pallet. Again, Sue's got a copy of that there. I can't remember the numbers on this, but there'd be 300-400 plants up here. And we'll just go through some of the images of this. It's grown in beautifully. We have, some of these beds are elevated. You'll see shortly some trees, but in general, the soil profile varies from, it gets down to, again, about 130 mil on the edge where it meets the decking, and up to a maximum of about 600 or 700 mil depth there. So these are 12 months on from the completed project. No, 18 months. 12 months on it was from the completed project there. And we're looking south at this elevation, or southwest there. So difficult site. And we had to manipulate the planting. You'll see the tree ferns and things. First iteration of this didn't quite get the location right, even though the calculations in terms of sun angles in theory worked. We did some of our own marking, like a tide lines during the day when we're doing this, to indicate that locations of some of the birds' nests and some of these were just going to fry, and we've adjusted the planting set out on this to accommodate that. And that's the green wall grown in. It's got plants up and down, and much more sustainable. Green walls are, again, the flavour of the month, but I suspect some sorts of green walls, like flares and platform shoes that I wore once, I would never wear again, and perhaps other forms of fashion come and go and never to be seen again. Green walls have a place. Planter box style green walls are much more sustainable. The other sorts of green walls that exist, I'm not a big fan of. They are huge hydraulic systems that require a lot of power, a lot of energy to pump water up to what is essentially a hydroponic system. And it looks great in photos, and it looks great for people who don't live in the building, but it costs a fortune for them to maintain them. And they're quite expensive and difficult to maintain. This sort of style can achieve the same thing, used a lot in Singapore, this sort of style as well. And it works, and you can do it with natives. You don't have to put bougainvillea and convolvulus and star jasmine in there if you don't want. So there's again the finished works there. Buildings on the north, east and west side. So it has limited light action. And again, I thought I should finish with back to the bush. We've frolicked through the urban landscape. You've survived. You're back there, and Bruce has welcomed you with this final image of his from another job that he'll remember, which was a foreshore job up on Lake Macquarie. Thank you for your patience. I'm done.